Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Footprints. My name is Anthony Davis. I'm a educator at BHS, that's Beverly High School, for those of you who don't know. And joining me today on today's podcast, on today's show, is a gentleman who has definitely taken the business of basketball literally. I really enjoy speaking today with my guest, none other than Steve Gibbs, varsity head basketball coach at Pingree, and also the owner of Hoop Mountain. Steve, welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Well, Tony, I've heard a lot about it, and I said to myself when I had the invitation, I had to find out what it was all about firsthand, so thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be with you, a hoop legend and an all-around wonderful person.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I'll tell you, talking basketball is natural for me. It's in my blood. But I'm going to give you some accolades here. So you're the founder of the international basketball company called Hoop Mountain. You've run that for over 30 plus years, I would imagine.
Yeah, 38.
And right now, it seems like you have over 22 states you're actually in, which is kind of cool. Hoop Mountain franchises, nice. You work closely with a lot of the franchise owners, which I love. You co-founded Playmakers Travel Program, which I'm also a part of, which I love to do that. And you've been the varsity head basketball coach at Pingree School since 2002. That is amazing, amazing. You voted Coach of the Year, which is also cool. We like that. And this is the best part of this whole thing, ladies and gentlemen. Steve Gibbs has placed over 25 Pingree students in college basketball, most notably, most recently, our guy Ray Cuevas, who now played at Bowdoin College this past year and was Rookie of the Year. So having said all of that and letting you know how much I appreciate you being here today, what first inspired you to get into coaching, and how was your coaching philosophy evolved sort of over the years?
Well, thank you, Tony. I was inspired because I grew up in a basketball mecca town, Lexington, where we had on the high school roster back in the 70s, we had a NBA player and many college players on the roster. And being in the culture of Lexington High basketball, all of a sudden I was really stung by that arrow, and I just gravitated towards basketball. And then I went to Northeastern. I was a student manager for Hall of Fame basketball coach Jim Calhoun. Yeah. And it's just one of those kind of things where it's always been in my blood, right, basketball. And because I started Hoop Mountain in 1986, I was consumed starting that company, getting that company off the ground. But when I had a chance, once the company was somewhat established, I always knew that I wanted to coach basketball, because just like yourself too, that we share a common bond, we share a common theme about education. It's about teaching. It's about being able to find a way to impact people. And like yesterday afternoon, I spent the afternoon with the aforementioned Ray Cuevas. And if you don't get just a positive, warm, fuzzy feeling spending time with guys like Ray Cuevas. So I think it's knowing as a basketball coach that we can impact these players in so many different ways. I mean, and you find out, like last week, I had a long phone call with a player we both coached last year, Charlie Lynch, and he's right now on the verge of transferring. And just knowing that he wanted to talk to me on the phone and kind of seek my advice. And that's why we do it. And we find out it's about not about the headlines, about also the relationships, as far as these warm, deep relationships with players. And once they all of a sudden graduate, we find out, rather than talking X and O's, we all of a sudden find out we have now this escalating friendship where we talk about their careers.
Yes.
Or we talk about what they want to do post-college. And I think that's, to me, the common theme with myself and you that we just love. I mean, this past year at Pingree, we didn't win as many games as we wanted, but you saw after that last game the love between the players and the coaches. So that's what inspired me to be able to be there and every day try and be a mentor to not just the Pingree kids, but also like Friday. This past Friday, I spent the morning with the coach at Gordon, just trying to mentor him over the past couple of years and kind of show him the ropes in terms of, all right, you're coaching now at 24 years old at Gordon College. Let's kind of map out your future. So we're very fortunate to be in that position, to be able to impact young men.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I always go back to what my dad said to me, and I remember this quote. He said, how you make others feel about themselves, right, ultimately says a lot about you as a person and as a coach. And for me, it's been the journey with basketball has been just magical for me. I've enjoyed all the coaching, but more importantly, like you said, it's the relationships you build with your players after the playing is over, and that's one of the beautiful things about what we do as coaches and educators. Those footprints right there that we talk about, right, that we leave, which is a beautiful thing. So now, after 20 plus years as a varsity head coach, what do you think the biggest change in high school basketball has been over the recent years?
It's probably, Tony, it's probably the intervention by club coaches and parents, where it used to be the players were somewhat organically on their own and kind of navigating the path by themselves. And today, you happen to find out there's a lot more people in their ear, so to speak. And as a basketball professional, I take great pride being able to delineate to these players proper advice and counsel about how to map out their future. However, what's happened in the past few years, we find out that there's a lot of so-called hanger-oners, the so-called self-proclaimed experts out there, and quite often offering very misleading advice. And it's really been kind of one of my really pet peeves, that all of a sudden when we're now have in our palm of our hand the future of a young man, and I see that quite often either these so-called insiders are now giving a so-called bump steer to a high school player,
For sure.
i.e., whether it's going to be advice about higher education or it's going to be advice about training or club selection, and also, too, the parents. The parents, we found out the type of thing when you and I were playing basketball, that quite often we play in a gym just with our friends.
Right.
And the mother and father were there back home or in their careers doing their thing. But nowadays it's very much hands-on.
For sure.
It's very hands-on.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I applaud the families because the sacrifices they make to be able to really put their daughters or sons in a position to be able to really flourish.
Without a doubt.
However, too often you find out, like pre-game or post-game, that quite often the parents are all of a sudden so emotionally attached that quite often that they happen to offer advice to their children, which could be quite often could be really damaging.
Yes,
and
yes.
It could be damaging.
That's because they're not really experts like you and I. We've been in the business for a long time, so we know what's good and what's not good, what to avoid and who to speak to. And I think that's really important when you're picking like a school or a coach, that you get comfortable with. So that's like top of my list anyway. If I were a parent, I would want my son or daughter to be really comfortable with the coach. We're going to talk a little bit about your daughter. She plays in college, but tell me, any siblings with you, Coach Gibbs?
Well, yeah, my younger brother, he's been a long-time coach. He's coaching right now at Concord Carlisle, and just like myself, growing up in Lexington, he caught the bug himself too, and like you, Tony, he's a teacher. He's been teaching in Woburn High for many years, and I think that just comes from my father, who's a longtime college professor at Cornell and Brandeis, so it's kind of in the DNA.
Nice, I love that. Married, sir?
Yeah.
Yes? How long?
Well, I've been my wife's a basketball widow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Mine too.
Yeah, she didn't see me during the course of the season. There's a rumor that we're married during the season. Yeah.
It's a big rumor.
Yeah, she sends a mail to Pingree
Yes,
from my
indeed.
office, but we've been married for 28 years. And
Wow.
suffice to say, she realized in the prenuptials that I put in there, I had to coach basketball and run my events year round. And, for the holidays, I stop by.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. You have children, sir?
I have 4.
Okay. And we said that you do have a daughter playing college basketball. Tell us a little bit about that adventure with her. What is her name, by the way?
Well, her name is Savannah, and she plays in a very elite league, the UAA, which is a very high Division III league, where the 8 teams in that league are spread across the U.S. in Chicago, St. Louis, Boston, Atlanta, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and New York City and upstate New York. So it's basically a Division I league in the sense of travel. We'll leave school on a Thursday morning. Let's say they have a game at Brandeis, fly to Boston on Thursday morning, and they spend the day in Boston, walk through study halls, team dinner at night, Friday walkthroughs, study hall, and a game at Brandeis Friday night.
Wow.
And then Saturday morning, they either fly or bus down to New York to play NYU on the following day on Sunday. So it's basically a 4-day road trip. And so it's very much a first-class basketball experience, but at a very academic elite school. She's at a beautiful school in Pittsburgh called Carnegie Mellon University, and they actually just won this past season a record wins. They've never won 20 games in school history, and they won 20 games. And first time in many, many years, they qualified for the NCAA tournament. And she played the previous weekend in Baltimore in the first round. They won their first round game and lost in a very close game the second round. So she is thrilled and happy, fulfilled, and loving playing basketball.
I'll tell you something. He's not just whistling Dixie. She's a heck of a player. In fact, last year I believe she was Rookie of the Year, or
last year she was All-League player.
All-League.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is amazing to think that. I mean, the work that she put in to get to that level. Most kids are not willing to do that. And she was willing to do that, and that has a lot to say about you as her father and also a varsity basketball coach yourself. Let's talk a little bit about Hoop Mountain in the business of basketball. So, what are some of the biggest challenges you would say, or some of the biggest lessons you've learned from the business side of basketball?
Well, Tony, when you talk about the business of basketball, you happen to find out that your eyes better be wide open. I mean, a slippery slope, and you happen to find out there's a shark-infested tank out there. And like yourself, I happen to be a person, I like to think anyways, I'm out there trying to be gracious, and I try to be a person where I try to be on the up and up. And you find out that sometimes in basketball, people have different agendas sometimes, and when you're trusting and you're a person who wants to give everyone a first or second chance, sometimes you get dinged up along the way. And probably the biggest challenge for myself has been, when we talk about franchising, that just because you happen to have a franchisee and they have your roadmap, they have your name, they have your brand name, they have your website, you happen to give them all of a sudden the recipe, give them the map, that quite often, and they mean well, these people, but I don't think they realize in terms of what goes into it, and you have to be a person who, one, is very humble, because you're talking to a lot of basketball coaches who, tend to pontificate and talk about their team, about themselves. You have to be willing to take a back seat to them and just kind of all of a sudden quell your ego, number one. And two, you have to be a person who just wants to dive in and be really invested, working with all the coaches and working with lots and lots of players. And you have to kind of all of a sudden be the person like yourself, Tony, be very compassionate and really be mentally involved in the coaches' lives and their players' lives. You have to really find a way to put yourself in their shoes.
Oh, no question.
And I think if you could do
That's the
that,
biggest one.
if you really get immersed in their coaching life and their players' lives, then all of a sudden you feel part of the equation. And I think when it comes to franchisees, what I've learned along the way is this: I can give them all these tools, my toolkit, but one thing I can't offer them, quite frankly, is the ability to get along with all kinds of different people, number one. Two, to be able, there's so often there's going to be brush fires along the way. There's so many brush fires, and you have to be able to meet those fires head on, number two. And three, you find out the basketball world is changing by the minute.
No question.
So you have to be evolving all the time. I mean, for many years, Tony, I was probably very settled and very happy to do my certain things in basketball, but I found out in the past couple of years there's been a flurry of activity. It's been very, very fluid and changed by the second. So you have to be willing to open yourself up to change all the time, because the whole basketball world is changing all the time.
No question. So this leads me to my next question. What do you think really separates or differentiates sort of Hoop Mountain from other basketball training programs and camps?
Well, it comes down to one thing. It's hands-on. It's personal. It's like when you happen to be offering training to your players, it's you. You're not also subcontracting out to some other coach. It's you. It's you. And the parents know that their son or daughter is in good hands with you, as opposed to you all of a sudden having the client, but having the client now work with someone else. So I think it's really, really critical that everything you happen to do in this basketball world, that you have your DNA all over it. And you have to be hands-on, you got to micromanage it. And I think the day that you're not present in it, I think all of a sudden you find out it's going to lose something.
Yes.
It's going to lose something. Because we see a lot of basketball franchises talk about basketball, and you happen to see that's almost like a traveling circus. They come into town for 2 or 3 days, but they have no roots whatsoever. Right. And you find out, especially in New England, that there's people have been doing this for a long, long, long time, and you can't overnight be able to really figure out the New England basketball world, because
it's a lot that goes into
there's
it.
A lot. There's a lot. There's a lot. So you have to really be present 7 days a week and be into it year-round.
No question. So player development is really huge with playmakers, and I'm happy to be a part of. So what do you look for in a player beyond just talent and skill? What else do we look for? Is there something else that you're kind of looking for in that particular player?
It's actually all about one thing. I mean, when you talk about Ray Cuevas, there's a person who, yesterday, I'm talking to Ray yesterday, and I asked him about his year at Bowdoin, and he's so humble and so modest. Didn't even talk about number of points he scored, didn't talk about his accolades, as you mentioned, in terms of being Rookie of the Year. He didn't mention that whatsoever. But that being said, we know one thing about Ray is this, that he, one, understands what goes into it, and two, he's got the right family around him to support him. And I think what separates most players is that so-called drive. I mean, you mentioned about this morning, while I was sleeping and dreaming of candy canes and sugar plums, you're in the gym this morning at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
And anytime you have a basketball coach and a player who are willing to make that conscious decision to be in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, those are the players where you find out in December and in November during the season, in January, those are players that get ahead. And now those decisions they make in March are going to affect winning and his success during the season.
Oh, no question.
It's really it's the intangibles. It's all about the intangible. I met with a family Sunday morning. Their son's going to be attending Pingree in September.
Okay.
And the family is all they talked about in terms of how their son, who just won a state title, 8th grader, won a state title at Georgetown Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah, a Saturday afternoon, I'm sorry.
Oh, congratulations to them, huh?
Yeah, and Sunday, here he was, he wanted to be back in the gym. Just won a state title, 8th grader.
Wow.
Wanted to get back in the gym on Sunday. So you can say right now that there's a player who all of a sudden has a chance to all of a sudden make his mark out there just because he's got the drive.
Yeah, and a lot of kids don't have that particular drive, you know. It's really interesting. When you love something like that, it just sort of gravitates and it just permeates your whole spirit, right? And you decide, this is what I'm going to do. I'm all in, and I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to try to be the best version of myself as I'm going through that journey, right? Do you have a favorite success story, say, from a player who came through Hoop Mountain and kind of went on to do some great things?
Yeah, I have a number of people who they came into Pingree as ninth graders,
Yeah.
and what you thought was going to happen, you find out in retrospect you're wrong. There's that famous story about Michael Jordan being cut. Well, there was a player at Pingree who became a professional basketball player who I cut.
Wow.
He entered Pingree as a ninth grader, and it wasn't like our team was a so-called wagon of a team. But yet, okay, in my so-called brilliance of thinking, I happened to be the person who was able to stop him because I cut him. So now all of a sudden, here I am, that Michael Jordan joke about who can hold Michael Jordan under 20?
Right.
Dean Smith.
Exactly.
Dean Smith, he wouldn't play him too much as a freshman.
Exactly.
And when it came to Allen Williamson, who could hold him under 20? Me,
Right.
because I cut him.
Because you cut him.
I cut him. And after one game at Governor Academy, I think I realized I had egg on my face, and I was dead wrong. I had to all of a sudden say to the assistant coaches, boy, you know some guys, once again, you're right, I'm wrong. I should listen to you guys. And sure enough, next game, we happened to call him up, and as a freshman, he made his mark, and his career was so illustrious, he ended up being the MVP of the Final Four.
Wow.
In college, won national championship, then went on to play professional basketball. So I would say, in terms of success, we had a bumpy start at the beginning, but he overcame my coaching and became just a national phenom in the month of March, winning the MVP in the Final Four.
Well, you know, what's interesting about that story is that, you know, you always have to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, right? Or someone has to give you some fuel so you can get going and really kind of get onto your journey and figure out exactly what it is you want to do, right? The most important thing I remember is people don't really decide their futures. They decide their habits. And then their habits decide their future. And so that being said, a lot of times people don't understand if whatever you do daily, that's who you are. That's who you become. And becoming a coach was second to none for me because as a teacher and an educator, right, those footprints were left on me, and I took those footprints, and it's synonymous basketball coaching as well as teaching. So I was like, okay, I can fuse those two together and hopefully make a difference in somebody's life on their journey along this path of what we're trying to accomplish with these kids, you know. Good question here. I'm thinking about this because as we get through this journey of basketball, and basketball is such a huge culture, and it's such a great game, and the evolution is going on. How has sort of the AAU or the grassroots basketball sort of impacted school coaching and player development? Talk a little bit about your son Steve, who developed something that we all know and love called zero gravity, correct?
Yeah. It's funny because me and Stevie happen to be polar opposites in terms of our philosophy as far as basketball. And quite often when I speak to him, I tell him that you created this monster called club basketball. And he started this company, Zero Gravity, 12 years ago and became the largest event basketball grassroots company in the United States. And all of a sudden, we went from playing basketball as far as with a club every once in a while, and only a select few were playing AU basketball. But once all of a sudden he happened to discover and happened to establish zero gravity, now we found out that now players are putting the ball down as far as training, or all of a sudden just going to the playground playing pickup. And now what happened was this: there was all this club basketball year round. And what's happened is this: I've seen that too often players confuse playing AU basketball with skill development.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I would say this, and I'm sure you would concur, as a high school basketball coach, that quite often we spend weeks, if not months, during the season trying to undo the flaws the players pick up during the season.
Yes.
AU season.
No truer statement has ever been said right there, sir.
Well,
you were correct.
Just because sometimes you find out that as long as you have a whistle or clipboard, you become a club basketball coach.
Mm-hmm.
And we see quite often in high school and even in college that too often that just something as simple as making a pass can be a real adventure for some players. And
you were correct, sir.
Yeah, and it's quite often you're there, you just scratch your head saying to yourself, how, pray tell, this player play basketball every single year but doesn't know how to be able to have proper balance or proper footwork.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see what's happened is this: if you're dropped down from Mars to this country and walked in on a Saturday watching AU basketball, you'd be saying to yourself, what, pray tell, is going on? Because it's just controlled chaos out there. And rather than trying to teach the game of basketball, they're all playing to the scoreboard.
Right.
They're all trying to win a basketball game as opposed to, and shame on me, back in the fall, here I was coaching for the first time club basketball in a long time, an 8th grade team, and here I was the first week just working on defensive stance, defensive positioning, and how to all of a sudden defend the basketball. And the parents are asking me, what happened to pressing? What happened to all of a sudden fast breaking? Why are you spending so much time on just all of a sudden 5-on-5 team defense or 1-on-1 team defense?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I just think it'd be a disservice to the players if we throw them out there in a game and they have no conception whatsoever how to properly be able to incorporate the basics of the game.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's what you need to be able to understand. It's like you go back to basics. Everything is based on fundamentals, right? Even Michael Jordan, when he was playing and he was in his heyday, right? His fundamentals were exceptional. Larry Bird, fundamentals exceptional. Magic Johnson, all these great players, right? They put in the work. And that's the bottom line right there, right? If you put in the work, generally speaking, it's going to show somewhere later on down the line. And I think that's really important as far as like the player development and doing what you need to do in order to become a really good player. How do you see basketball evolving maybe in the next 10 or 20 years? What do you think it's going to be like?
Well, I mean, first off, you have to be just in love with the women's game nowadays. I mean, we're seeing right now in terms of how the women's game is taken a national stage and how I think there's going to be a lot more young females playing basketball. I think the Paige Beckers, Caitlin Clarks have inspired more young players playing basketball. So I think from the standpoint of participation, I think we're going to see that as far as the women's game grow more and more and more, which is a beautiful thing.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of our game, as far as the boys sector, I think we're seeing nowadays that players all over the world are playing basketball. I mean, I started a franchise in 2012 in a small country in the Middle East, Kuwait, that I spent a lot of time there. And basketball was probably next to Tiddlywinks in terms of interest and popularity in Kuwait. I mean, I went to a professional game there, that's using the term loosely, where the players are overweight by 20, 30 pounds.
Right.
Halftime, the referee is smoking butts. And there was no one in the stand besides myself and my partner. And now you've seen, we've been there, Hoop Mountain's been there since, 2012. And now, believe it or not, we have players right now on the Georgetown roster and other rosters around the country, which is unthinkable to think that we now have developed in a small country of Kuwait, where we have Hoop Mountain Kuwait, which teaches the game 6 days a week for 10 months a year. And all we do is we teach basics. And now we have players from Kuwait, where players years ago never played basketball whatsoever.
Yeah.
And now they're on a high Division I college roster. So I just think the world nowadays is playing basketball, and we've seen in terms of the NBA draft throughout the years.
Yeah, no
I mean,
question.
just think about Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, for many years, I had a lot of Canadians come to my camp, and you can see that their coaches came along with them, and their coaches were primarily coaches who coach other sports, and,
Right.
and basketball is secondary. But now, because they got Americanized, the Canadian coaches, they've been able to all of a sudden disseminate all this American teaching
Yep.
to the Canadians. And we saw last year in the Olympics, last August.
Yeah, they were very good.
Canadians, they reached I think the quarterfinal round.
Yeah.
And the first time they qualified for many, many, many years. So I think in terms of the trend, what I'm seeing nowadays, in terms of, I think there's just a proliferation of international basketball.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny that you said that, because in the NBA, I think personally, SGA, who plays on OKC, is from Canada, and that's Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, for those people who don't know. One of the best NBA players you're going to see. Affects winning not only on the court, but also off the court. Really beloved and liked by his teammates. I think because he understands the vibe. He understands that your mindset is like a magnet, and if you think about blessings, guess what? You're going to attract those blessings, right? And if you think about problems, guess what? You're going to attract those as well,
Yeah.
right? So you got to kind of cultivate some good stuff, right? Good thoughts, and always remain like positive and optimistic. I mean, I'm the guy that thinks the cup is always half full and not half empty. I've been that way my whole life, and and sometimes it served me well, sometimes not so well, but that's okay. I'm still going to be that guy no matter what. So we get what we think we are, right? And so by thinking positive in life and doing those things and laying those things out, automatically positivity is going to follow you around. I think a big part of what I do as a teacher and also as a coach is being very empathetic towards someone else's plight, right? Because I understand that their journey is going to be a lot different than mine. And for me, I just want to impact whatever they're doing in their life positively so that they have a good memory of me, right? Whether it be in the classroom or on the basketball court, okay? Looking back, what are you most proud of in your career at this particular juncture?
Good question, Tony. It's probably by my children. I mean, words can't describe. When I was at Savannah's NCAA basketball game last weekend, the game was over. She won a NCAA tournament game. She came to the lobby to meet me and my wife, and being around the NCAA tournament for so many years, now having my daughter play in it, I was overcome with emotion. And what happened was I started to well up, and then my daughter, who's very stoic, she started crying too, and my wife said, "Why don't you guys take it outside?" But I think when you see your children be able to take part of your life and run with it and have success with it, then that is something which, to me, trumps everything right there.
No question. You're right. I mean, to be able to give that gift of basketball to her, and her being able to receive that gift and then take it and go to college and do some really incredible things. If I'm her father, I couldn't be more prouder, and I'm happy for you and her as well. Couple more questions. One is, if you could go on vacation and money were no object, and you would take your lovely wife, where would you go and why?
Well, I mean, if she was not, if she had no vote in this, what I'd be doing right now is a no-brainer. I'd be spending the entire month going from NCAA tournament site. I'd be bouncing around the whole country right now. I mean, last Saturday, I went down to Providence. I watched the Ivy League basketball championships. And I can't begin to tell you, Tony, in terms of what kind of feeling you have when you're on an elite college campus. You're surrounded by these alums who love their college. It was Yale playing Princeton. And you're watching the basketball, and a lot of the players you know from various ways, and you're watching it and knowing that they have one chance to advance. And if they win, they advance. If they lose, they go home. And the emotion in that gym is second to none. So if I had a chance to go on vacation right now, I'd be bouncing around, Tony, Gym to gym to gym.
Gym to gym, huh?
Yeah. And
With the wife in tow?
Well, my wife might be saying, listen, I'll meet you down in Naples, Florida.
I'm sure she would.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, actor, famous athlete, basketball star, whoever, who would it be and why?
Dead or alive, it'd be my mother and father.
Oh, okay.
Be my
All
mother
right.
and father.
Okay. All right.
And
those are the footprints they left on you,
Right.
in terms of you turning out the way you have turned out.
Well,
Same with me.
Thank you. No, it's something where I impart their wisdom every single day, and a day didn't go on without my self-referencing what they taught me and my gratitude for them. And this day, my father's been passed for 14 years, but his legacy as far as what he did and my mother did in terms of, at my dad's college, when he went to college, he had no money. His parents were essentially broke. So the college allowed him to go to school for 4 years for free.
Wow.
And he always said to the college, I repay you. And he did, and he has a very large scholarship there today for underprivileged children.
Wow. It's amazing.
Yeah, those are the type of things which make you so proud that they stay with you for a long time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. And to know that, those footprints were given to you, and you take those and carry those forward and do the things you have been doing with, not only with Pingree basketball as a varsity head coach, but also with Hoop Mountain and establishing that, and also not only that, but playmakers as well with the AAU club basketball. I've been very happy to be a part of all of it, and hopefully continue that for sure, no doubt. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time. We got to go. Thank you for joining us today. My guest, I'd like to thank my guest, Steve Gibbs, for coming and talking with us today. And please make sure you find us on all the podcast streaming services. We're on Spotify, we're on Podbean, Pod Republic, Overcast, Pod Addict, and also Castbox, all those. Also, I believe Channel 22, I think will be on as well. This will be posted. I'll tell you, it's been my pleasure to have been speaking today with Coach Steve Gibbs, and I always leave you with this question, and I want you to think about it. Who left a footprint on you? I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.